There it was, towering above her. The lion's eyes glowed orange, its breath hot and sticky with sugar. It let out a deep growl that shook the ground beneath her feet. Chin turned and ran. Through the empty streets of Lagos, with her flour-stained apron flapping behind her like a cape, she sprinted into the darkness. But the lion was too fast. It pounced. Its sugar claws slashed the air as it launched itself at her. Chin screamed, but the sound got lost in the chaos of her own panic. How did it come to this? Why was a cake trying to kill her? Let's go back to how it all started. Meet Chin, the magic baker. Chinelo, but everyone called her Chin, was just 26 and already the most talked about baker in all of Lagos. Her bakery, Chin's Charms, sat at the corner of a busy street in Yaba. Rich women, influencers, and business moguls ordered cakes from her months in advance. There was something about her cakes. They weren't just sweet. They felt alive. People cried when they tasted them. Others said they dreamt of the cake days after eating it. But Chin wasn't perfect. Behind her glowing smile was a short temper and a past full of scars. She yelled at her staff often, especially when things weren't going her way. "Why is this fondant cracked?" she would shout, eyes burning. Teo, her assistant, took most of the hits. "Sorry, Ma," he'd whisper, afraid to anger her more. But no one knew about the necklace. A year ago, an old woman had walked into her shop one rainy evening. She didn't buy anything. She just handed Chin a necklace made of tiny wooden beads and said, "You will need this. It protects bakers with hearts full of fire." Chin had scoffed. "I don't believe in superstitions," she muttered, tossing it into a drawer. That was her mistake. Because that necklace was the only thing standing between her and the curse that was coming. The old woman had looked like a beggar. Her wrapper was faded, her sandals broken, and her skin was the color of dusty cocoa. When she walked into Chin's Charms, the air in the bakery suddenly felt heavier. Even the fridge behind the counter began to hum louder, as if it sensed something strange. "Good afternoon," Chin had greeted her with polite irritation. It was late. She was tired. And the smell of butter and vanilla had already soaked into her bra. But the woman didn't answer. She only looked around the bakery slowly, nodding to herself, as though the place was already familiar. Then she reached into her ragged bag and brought out a small necklace. It was simple, a string of dark wooden beads, tied together with a piece of fraying red thread. At the center was a tiny carved spoon. "For you," the woman said. "You'll need it soon." Chin raised her eyebrow. "Are you selling it?" "No. I'm giving it." "You have fire in your hands, child. But fire can burn what it loves, if it is not careful." Chin frowned. "Ma, please, I don't have time for this. I'm not interested in charms. I am not a native doctor. I bake cakes." The woman's eyes did not blink. "Not all witches wear red. And not all fire is evil. But yours is wild. You must wear it, or you will bake more than cakes. You will bake your fears." That was when Chin snapped. "Please leave, Ma. Or I will call security." She snatched the necklace from the woman's hand and tossed it into the drawer behind the counter, where she kept extra cake toppers and measuring spoons. Then she turned her back and walked toward the kitchen. When she looked back, the woman was gone. No footsteps. No door sound. Just gone. Chin shook her head and muttered, "Nonsense." She didn't know why her hands trembled slightly as she washed her utensils that night. Later that week, Chin opened the drawer to get a silver happy birthday topper for a cake order. The necklace was gone. She didn't think too much of it. Maybe one of her assistants threw it away while cleaning. Maybe it got stuck to a cake box. Who cared? But from that day, strange things began to happen in the bakery. Her vanilla icing would bubble on its own, even when the mixer wasn't on. The cupcakes she left in the oven overnight would be arranged differently in the morning. And sometimes, just sometimes, when she sliced a finished cake, it bled. Just a little. Red like food coloring. But it made her pause every time. Still, Chin ignored it. She blamed her tired eyes, her long hours, her imagination, until the day she baked something that roared. The bakery phone rang 3 times before Chin picked it up. Hello, Chin's Charms. How may I help you? The voice on the other end was deep, polished, and official. Good afternoon. This is Barrister Salami. I'm calling on behalf of Chief Olawale, the former Minister of Commerce. His daughter is getting married in 2 weeks, and we would like to place an order for a custom wedding cake. Chin's eyes widened. Chief Olawale? That's big money. Yes, sir. I would be honored. Please tell me what you're looking for. The barrister gave her a list, a 6-tier cake, designed with gold leaf, fresh orchids, edible diamonds, and 2 sugar-sculpted lions, 1 male, 1 female, sitting majestically on top, to represent strength and unity. We want it to be the talk of Lagos, he said. Chin smiled. It will be. You have my word. When she ended the call, she screamed with excitement. Teo! Teo! He ran into the kitchen, still wiping his hands on his apron. Yes, Ma. We just landed the Olawale wedding. Start clearing the counters. We're going into full production mode. Teo clapped. Ah. This one NA generational blessing oh. Chin nodded but didn't smile. Yes. And everything must be perfect. No mistakes. The next day, Chin began planning. She bought special sugar from France, imported cocoa from Belgium, and spent 3 nights sketching the lion sculptures. The male lion would sit proudly with its chest puffed out. The female lion would be slightly smaller, calm, and wise-looking. The whole city would be watching this cake. But something felt off. Whenever Chin worked on the lion sculptures, her fingers would tingle. Not in a painful way, more like a low electric buzz. She blamed stress. After all, this was her biggest order yet. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that the lion eyes she molded were watching her. For days later, the cake was halfway done. The base layers were perfect. The vanilla buttercream was firm and smooth. The orchids were fresh and ready to place. All that remained were the lions. Chin worked on the male lion all night. She shaped his paws, his thick mane, and finally his eyes. She used a tiny brush to add a golden glow to the irises. And then it happened. As she turned to reach for her icing bag, she heard something. Low. Guttural. Like a breath. She froze. Slowly, she turned back to the sugar lion. Its mouth had moved. At first, she thought she imagined it. Maybe the icing shifted. Maybe it was her tired mind. She leaned closer. The lion's sugar tongue twitched. Chin stumbled back, knocking over her bowl of egg whites. No, no, no. She grabbed a spatula and poked the lion's head. It blinked. She screamed, backing into the pantry, eyes wide with terror. Teo! Teo ran in, confused. Ma, what happened? Chin pointed to the lion sculpture. Tell me you saw that. Tell me that thing didn't just blink. Teo stared. I don't understand. The lion didn't move again. It sat perfectly still, just sugar, just decoration. Chin wiped her forehead. I need sleep. That's all. But as she turned her back, the sugar lion's jaw quivered, and the oven behind her clicked on by itself. Chin didn't sleep that night. She tried, she really did. She lay on her bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly above her. But every time she closed her eyes, all she could see was that lion. The way its sugar tongue twitched. The way it blinked at her like it wasn't made of frosting and flour, but something darker, something alive. By 5 a.m., she was back at the bakery. She told herself it was just exhaustion. Maybe she didn't sleep enough. Maybe she was just hallucinating. But as she unlocked the door, something was wrong. Very wrong. The bakery was too quiet. The air inside was colder than usual. The scent of sugar and butter was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Something raw. Like wet fur. She stepped in cautiously. The smell hit her first. It wasn't the sweet, welcoming scent of freshly baked bread or melted chocolate that usually filled Chin's charms. This was different, thick and wild, like the scent of a wet animal trapped in a small room. Chin stepped into the bakery slowly. The lights were still off, but she could see the faint outline of the 6-tier cake on the central work table. Everything looked fine from a distance, no broken glass, no signs of forced entry. But something was off. She moved closer. And then she froze. The lion sculpture, the sugar lion, was gone. Not broken. Not damaged. Gone. Completely missing from the top of the cake. Chin's heart dropped. Her eye scanned the room. Maybe it fell? Maybe the air conditioning had blown it off? But that lion was heavy. Nearly 2 kilograms of sculpted sugar. It couldn't have just disappeared. Teo, she called softly, even though she knew he wasn't in yet. Teo, are you here? Silence. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the kitchen. Chin jumped and dropped her purse. Her breath caught in her throat. Slowly, step by step, she crept toward the kitchen door. Her palms were sweaty, her knees trembling. As she pushed the door open, she screamed. Standing in the center of the kitchen was the lion. Not a sugar sculpture. A real, full-sized lion, its body golden brown but with a strange sheen, like it was made from hardened icing and muscle. Its mane was thick, curled, and laced with what looked like threads of caramel. Its claws glittered with edible gold dust. It was breathing. And staring at her. Chin backed away slowly, her mind unable to make sense of what she was seeing. What is this?" she whispered. The lion let out a low growl. It wasn't loud, but it rumbled through her bones. Its eyes, those sugar eyes she had painted, blinked again. Chin turned to run. But the lion was faster. With a roar that shook the bowls off the shelf, it lunged forward, knocking over trays and batter, its claws slashing through the air where her face had just been. Chin fell to the ground, scrambling backward, her apron tangling around her legs. She screamed, "Help! Somebody help me!" She reached for a metal bowl and threw it. It bounced off the lion's head with a loud clang, but only made it angrier. It opened its mouth and let out a roar that made the oven door fly open behind it. The lion advanced. Just then, Teo burst through the bakery's front door. "Chin! I forgot my phone." He stopped. His eyes widened. "What in the name of?" "Teo, run!" Chin screamed. But it was too late. The lion turned. And it roared again. "Teo, run!" But Teo couldn't move. He stood frozen at the door, eyes locked on the beast before him. A full-grown lion, glowing faintly like polished sugar, stood between him and Chin. Its breathing was thick and loud. Its tail swayed slowly, knocking a metal mixing bowl off the counter. Yo! Chin screamed again, crawling backwards on all fours, her hands slick with icing and sweat. That snapped him out of it. Teo dove behind the prep table just as the lion leapt toward him, crashing into racks of flour bags and sending white dust everywhere. A loud bang echoed as baking pans flew across the room like coins tossed in anger. Chin grabbed a heavy rolling pin from the ground. Her hands were shaking, but she gripped it tight. "I'm going to die in my own bakery," she whispered. The lion turned back toward her. Its caramel mane was now dusted with flour, making it look ghostly. Its sugar-glazed eyes were locked on her like she was prey. But then, it stopped. It sniffed the air. Sniffed again. Its mouth twitched as though it tasted something bitter. Teo peeked out from behind a sack of icing sugar. The lion growled. Then, without warning, it turned and sprinted straight through the pantry door, shattering it into pieces like cardboard. Silence. Chin remained on the floor, breathing heavily. Her hair clung to her face, wet with fear and sweat. Her apron was torn and a cut on her leg stung sharply. But she didn't care. She looked at Teo, who was still frozen. "You saw it," she said, barely able to get the words out. "You saw that, right?" Teo nodded slowly. That thing was real. Chin pulled herself up using the counter. "It was the lion I baked. The sugar lion. I don't know how. I don't know why. But that thing came to life." "No," Teo said, standing now, his voice low. "That's not possible. That's a decoration. A sculpture." "It was," she said. "But I think it woke up." They locked the bakery and called in sick for the day. That night, Chin sat alone on her living room couch. The apartment was quiet except for the ticking wall clock and the low hum of her refrigerator. She held the small necklace in her hand, the one the old woman had given her. She didn't remember putting it in her purse, but somehow it was there again. The tiny carved spoon in the center glinted under the light. "You will bake your fears," the woman had said. Chin looked around. Was that what the lion was? Her fear? She used to dream of being hunted as a child, of being chased, torn apart, voiceless. Now she had baked it. And it had come to life. Chin didn't open the bakery the next day. She sat at home, curtains drawn, clutching the necklace the strange old woman had given her. The carved spoon on the red thread now felt heavier, almost warm, like it pulsed faintly with her heartbeat. She hadn't slept. How could she? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that lion, those sugar-glazed eyes, the glittering gold dust in its claws, the way it lunged at her like it had been waiting its whole life to punish her. Was it gone? Had it disappeared? She didn't know. And she was too afraid to go back and find out. Teo, however, did go back. Around 3 p.m., he called her. "Madam Chin," he whispered over the phone. "You need to come see this." "I'm not coming there," she hissed. That thing could still be inside. "No, listen, just come. But come through the back door. Quietly. It's not like before." Against her better judgment, Chin went. When she arrived, Teo was already at the rear entrance of Chin's Charms, eyes wide and face pale. "It's back," he said. "What? The lion?" Chin whispered. "No," he replied slowly. "Something else." She stepped inside the bakery and gasped. There, sitting calmly on the glass counter at the front of the shop, was the sugar lion. Whole. Unharmed. Exactly as it was before it came to life. Its posture, its golden manner, the shine in its eyes, it was all the same. Like nothing had happened. Like it had never moved at all. But that wasn't the worst part. The lion's mouth was slightly open now, as if smiling. And stuck between its sugar teeth was a long red thread. Chin's eyes widened. She touched her necklace. It was broken. The red thread that had held the carved spoon was gone. The lion had it now. "I don't understand," she whispered. "How is it back here? I saw it leap through the pantry. I saw it come to life." "I saw it too," Teo said, stepping closer. "I saw it chase you. I saw it breathe. I saw it roar. But now look." He touched the lion gently with a spatula. It didn't move. It was hard. Cold. Just sugar and frosting. "It's like nothing happened," Teo said. "Like we imagined everything." But Chin wasn't so sure. She stepped closer to the lion and looked deep into its sugary eyes. And for a second, just 1 second, the eyes blinked. She screamed and stumbled backward, nearly slipping on a tub of buttercream. "It moved," she shouted. Teo looked again. But this time, it didn't move. It sat still, silent, innocent. But the damage was done. Chin's heart was racing. Her mind was spiraling. This thing was not just sugar. It was not just decoration. It was alive, somehow, and it was playing with her. "I think it's coming back at night," Chin whispered, more to herself than to Teo. I think it's real when the lights go out. Like it waits for me to sleep, to breathe. Teo frowned. Madam, what are you saying? I don't think it's the only one, Chin said, turning slowly. I baked other things. Sculptures. Animals. Faces. People. Teo's mouth went dry. You mean? Yes, Chin said, her voice shaking. What if they all come to life? That night, Chin couldn't sleep. She tried, she really did. But how could she? After what happened with the lion and with that strange red thread now missing, her mind raced in every direction. What if there were more? What if every single creation she had baked over the years, every sugar animal, every iced sculpture, was now alive and lurking somewhere in the shadows? She sat in her bed, staring at the darkness, hearing only the creak of the floorboards and the wind tapping at her window. A part of her wanted to check the bakery again, to confirm that nothing else had come to life. But the fear of what she might find kept her frozen in place. Suddenly, she heard it. A low growl. A rumble that started faintly but grew louder, deeper, more threatening. It was coming from somewhere close, close enough that Chin could almost feel the vibrations under her feet. She shot up in bed. The growl stopped. A silence fell over the room. Chin waited, her breath caught in her chest. Then, a faint scratching sound. It was coming from the bakery. The sound of claws against the floor. She couldn't take it anymore. Chin grabbed her coat and rushed out of the apartment, running towards Chin's charms without thinking, without any plan. She reached the back door and stood still for a moment. The wind picked up, swirling through the alleyway, and for a split second, she thought she saw a shadow dart across the street. Then, the growl came again, closer this time. She pushed the door open carefully and stepped inside. The bakery was dark. The soft, familiar smell of flour and sugar was now tinged with something else, something earthy, almost wild. Chin switched on the overhead lights, but nothing looked unusual at first glance. The cake stands, the baking tools, the sugar dispensers, all were in their places. Everything seemed normal. But then she heard it again. The growl. She turned toward the back of the bakery, where her old baking sculptures were stored. The unfinished cakes, the half-finished sugar animals, the forgotten creations all stood there, lined up along the shelves. The growl came from that direction. Chin crept toward the back. And then, her heart stopped. There, among the half-finished sugar flowers, stood a second creature. A massive, intricately sculpted wolf, its fur a mix of caramel and brown, its fangs sharp and real-looking. The eyes, it was the eyes that made Chin's blood run cold. Its eyes were glowing a soft amber, alive and tracking her every move. It was breathing. Its chest rose and fell as though it had a heartbeat. Chin's legs wobbled beneath her. No, she whispered, backing away. No, no, no. The wolf took a step toward her. Its claws scraped across the floor with a noise like nails on a chalkboard. Then, its mouth parted, and it growled again. The sound was deep, primal, filled with hunger. Chin scrambled backward, her hand knocking over a bowl of sugar, spilling it everywhere. Why is this happening? She whispered to herself. She had baked them, she had made these animals for special orders, for events, for displays. But never had she imagined they would come to life. Never had she even thought it was possible. The wolf let out another growl, louder this time, and took another step forward. That was when Chin heard the loud crack. A third figure emerged from the shadows, a giant sugar bear, sitting in the corner where the wolf had been moments ago. Its eyes glinted with life, just like the lion's. Its form was massive, its fur a patchwork of whites, browns, and honeyed gold. The bear's snout twitched. Its ears flicked. It took a step forward, too. Chin's heart raced. This isn't real. She wanted to run, but where would she go? She turned toward the counter where the lion had been earlier that day. It was still there. But the lion wasn't looking at her anymore. It was watching the two beasts as they took slow, measured steps forward. A sudden thought hit her. Wait, there, Chin whispered, they're working together. A slow panic started to build. What did they want? Why were they all moving? What were they planning? Just as she took a step back, the bear let out a loud roar. And that was when she heard something she hadn't expected. A full sound. A creak. A sound of something shifting in the back, just beyond the pantry doors. Chin froze. Chin held her breath, the fear crawling up her spine. The bear, the wolf, and the lion were now circling her, moving with calculated precision, their glowing eyes following her every step. The lion's low growl rumbled in the silence, while the bear huffed, its hot breath visible in the dim light of the bakery. The wolf's amber eyes locked onto hers, its posture poised as though it were waiting for something. Then there was that creak again. It was louder this time, coming from the pantry door at the back of the room. Someone was coming through. Chin couldn't tear her eyes away from the creatures. They were moving closer, their bodies becoming more lifelike with each passing second. The sugar coating on the lion's fur had begun to melt, revealing a gleaming, hardened core beneath, almost as if it were alive and breathing in the warmth of the room. The wolf's tail flicked, sending a trail of dust into the air. Her mind raced. There had to be a way to stop them. They were just sculptures. But they weren't just sculptures anymore. They were alive. And now, they were working together. Was it the necklace? The red thread? Chin looked down at the empty space where the red thread had been, the broken necklace now hanging uselessly around her neck. Had she made a mistake? The creak came again. But this time, the door pushed open, and out stepped something even worse. A massive, towering figure. An elephant, made entirely of sugar, its tusks sharp and jagged, its body sculpted in such incredible detail that it almost seemed real. The creature stood at the threshold of the pantry, its eyes glowing a harsh, fiery orange, and its trunk lifted slowly, sniffing the air like a predator searching for prey. Chin's leg shook. She backed into the counter, clutching a nearby rolling pin. But even she knew it wouldn't help. She could barely hold the thing steady in her trembling hands. The elephant's trunk swung down, knocking over a shelf full of glass jars, causing them to shatter in a symphony of breaking glass. What is happening? She gasped, voice barely audible. She was surrounded now. The lion paced to her left, the wolf to her right, the bear in front, and the elephant was now behind her. They moved in perfect synchrony, like they had been waiting for something. Like they knew she would come. Like they knew she was the one who had made them. She squeezed her eyes shut. Then, a loud bang shattered the silence. Chin! Teo's voice. Her eyes snapped open as she turned toward the door. Teo stood in the doorway, holding a large, wooden broomstick in his hands, his face pale with fear. Chin, are you all right? He asked urgently, his eyes flicking toward the creatures. What are those things? What happened? Chin struggled to speak, her throat dry. They came to life. I don't know how. But I think the necklace, the red thread, something awakened them. Teo looked at her, confused. You mean all those animals you baked? All of them? Yes, she said quickly. All of them. But there's more. I've made more creations, things I haven't even finished yet. What if they all start coming to life? What if they're all out there waiting? Suddenly, a shrill sound filled the bakery. The high-pitched noise of metal scraping against metal. The lion leaped forward with terrifying speed, its body seeming to glow with a fiery energy. The wolf followed right behind it, and the bear gave a low, rumbling growl as it advanced. Teo backed away, looking terrified. What do we do? How do we stop them? I don't know. Ching shouted. I don't know how to stop them. But I can't just leave them here to destroy everything. We need to figure out what caused this, what started this curse. The elephant, its massive body taking up most of the space in the bakery, turned and raised its trunk. The creatures began to surround Chin and Teo, a slow and deliberate movement, as though they were drawing closer to a final decision. Chin's heart pounded in her chest. Her head was spinning with possibilities, but there was one truth that stuck in her mind. She had done this. She had created them. She had baked them into life, and now she was going to have to find a way to stop them before they destroyed everything she had built. Chin's heart raced in her chest as the creatures surrounded her and Teo. The lion, the wolf, the bear, and the towering elephant, they were all so lifelike, their glowing eyes fixed on her with a terrifying intensity. It felt as though they were waiting for something only she could provide. The air in the bakery had grown thick with tension. The temperature was rising, and the sweet smell of sugar and flour seemed to warp into something darker, more dangerous. "Chin, what are we going to do?" Teo's voice was shaky, his grip tightening on the broomstick he held in front of him like a shield. But it was clear that the weapon would do little against creatures made of sugar, bones, and claws. Chin stood frozen for a moment, panic threatening to take over. She had created them. She had brought them to life. But she still didn't understand why. Why had this happened to her? Why had the curse struck her bakery? "I think it's the unfinished creations," Chin said, her voice barely a whisper. "I've made so many cakes, sculptures, and treats over the years, but there were some I never finished. Maybe that's what's causing them to awaken." Teo looked at her, confusion clouding his face. "Unfinished creations?" "Yes," she replied, nodding. "The animals, the figures, the pieces I didn't complete. They were never meant to come to life, but maybe something went wrong. Maybe because I left them incomplete, the curse latched onto them." The lion growled softly, and the wolf bared its teeth, both animals moving slightly closer, as though in agreement. Chin took a deep breath. "I need to finish them," she said, more to herself than to Teo. "I need to finish every single one. It's the only way to stop this." Teo blinked. "Finish them? How? They're alive." "I don't know," Chin admitted, "but I have to try. If I don't, they'll tear this place apart. If they haven't already." Teo looked over at the creatures. The elephant's massive form blocked most of the space in the bakery, its trunk swaying from side to side, as though it were searching for something or someone. The bear and the lion circled them, and Chin could feel their eyes on her, waiting for something. The wolf, too, had stopped growling, its amber eyes unblinking as it shifted toward her with its head tilted to one side. It was waiting, just as she had been, for the final move. "I'm going to finish them," Chin said, her voice steady despite the terror that gripped her. She could do this. She had to. Teo gave a small nod, still holding the broomstick, though it looked ridiculous in the face of creatures made of magic and sugar. "Where do we start?" "Follow me," Chin replied, turning toward the back of the bakery. She moved toward the shelves that held the unfinished creations, her baking projects that had been left behind over time. Some of the sculptures were half-done animals, while others were abstract designs she had started but never had the time to complete. "Here," she said, pulling out a half-finished giraffe that was made of sugar, its long neck bending awkwardly to one side. Teo glanced at the creatures, his anxiety growing. "Chin, I don't know if we should be playing with these things. What if they attack us?" Chin swallowed hard, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "I don't have a choice. If we don't finish these, the curse will only grow stronger. We have to finish them all, or they'll keep coming to life. And next time, it might be worse than just animals." Teo hesitated for a moment, but then his gaze shifted to the creatures. The bear had moved closer, its massive form blocking the door, while the lion and the wolf stood at the ready, almost as if they were waiting for permission to strike. He gritted his teeth. "All right, let's finish them." Chin and Teo worked quickly, pulling down more of the unfinished creations from the shelves. As they began icing and shaping the sugar animals, the creatures around them remained still, but their eyes never left them. The lion's amber gaze never wavered, the bear's heavy breathing seemed louder now, and the wolf's tail twitched impatiently. Chin carefully piped more sugar onto the giraffe's neck, adding delicate lines to its body, sculpting it with meticulous care. The lion watched her, its gaze following every movement she made. "It's like they know," Chin muttered to herself, glancing up at the wolf, who stood silently, almost expectantly. The creatures didn't move as she finished each piece. The lion's mouth was slightly open, its fierce expression softened as Chin completed the final details of its face. She wasn't sure if she was making the right decision, but she had to keep going. There was no turning back now. As she worked on the last sugar piece, a small bird, the growling of the bear, suddenly stopped. The silence that followed made Chin glance up. The creatures had all grown still. Then, as if on cue, the lion's eyes softened. Its mouth closed slowly, and it took a step back. The wolf followed suit, stepping away, its eyes no longer glowing. The bear huffed once, its body relaxing. Chin froze, staring at the now calmed creatures. It worked. It worked, she gasped. But just as she thought the danger had passed, the ground beneath her feet seemed to tremble. She looked down at the floor, and then, boom, a loud crash echoed through the bakery. Teo turned quickly, his eyes wide with fear. Something had fallen, something had shattered. The crash echoed like thunder through the bakery, the noise so deafening it sent a ripple of panic through Chin's chest. She spun around, her eyes wide with terror, expecting the worst. The floor beneath her feet had cracked open, a deep fissure spreading across the room like a hungry mouth. Dust filled the air, and pieces of broken sugar sculptures lay scattered around her feet. Teo's face paled as he stepped back, eyes darting to the debris, trying to make sense of the situation. Chin, what happened? Teo's voice was tight with fear. I don't know, Chin breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. But whatever it is, it's not good. The bakery, once a safe haven for her creations, was now a war zone filled with the remnants of broken glass, splintered wood, and scattered sugar shards. The creatures that had once stood frozen in place were no longer still. They were stirring again. But this time, they weren't alone. A new, monstrous figure was rising from the deep crack in the floor, a hulking, half-formed beast made of sugar and dough. Its body was grotesquely misshapen, a twisted mixture of dough and sugar, its limbs long and uneven. Its head was a shapeless mass of dough, with glowing red eyes that flickered like embers in a fire. This new creation wasn't something Chin had made, it was something that had come into existence because of the curse. It was the result of all the unfinished work she had left behind, a manifestation of her mistakes, her neglect. Chin stepped backward, her hand trembling as she reached for Teo. It's not finished. It's the unfinished beast. The curse, it's gone too far. The beast let out a deafening roar, its voice booming through the bakery. It swung its massive limbs, knocking over tables and chairs with ease. The air seemed to vibrate with the force of its movements, the floor groaning under the weight of its monstrous form. Teo looked at Chin in panic. What do we do? How do we stop this thing? I don't know. Chin cried out. Her mind was racing. It's too powerful. I thought I could fix it by finishing the sculptures. But it's clear now, the curse doesn't work that way. It's growing stronger with every piece I've made. And now this monster is the result. The creature's glowing eyes fixed on them, and it began to lumber toward them with terrifying speed, its giant claws tearing through the floorboards. No! Chin shouted. We need to stop it before it gets any worse. Teo didn't hesitate. Grabbing a nearby wooden broomstick, he swung it at the beast, but it was like hitting stone. The broomstick shattered on impact, leaving the monster unharmed. The creature snarled, and the ground trembled beneath its steps as it drew closer. Chin's mind raced as she scanned the room. What could she do? How could she stop it? Her heart was pounding in her chest as the beast drew closer, its massive body filling the space. The creatures she had created, the lion, the wolf, the bear, watched the chaos unfold from a distance, their eyes locked on the unfinished beast. They're not attacking it, Chin whispered, noticing the stillness of the other creatures. The lion's eyes flicked toward her, and for a brief moment, she saw something like understanding, in its gaze. It was as if the lion knew what had to be done, but couldn't act on its own. They're waiting for me, Chin said, the realization hitting her like a bolt of lightning. What do you mean? Teo asked, his voice panicked. Chin turned toward the lion, the wolf, and the bear. They were waiting for me to finish the other creations, so they could stop this. They knew that the unfinished beast wouldn't stop unless I completed the curse. They knew that I had to make the final move. Teo's eyes widened. You mean we have to finish it? The beast? Chin nodded grimly. I have to finish it. If I don't, it will continue to grow, and it will destroy everything in its path. Teo's grip tightened on the broomstick, though he still seemed unsure of what he could do to help. How are you going to finish it? It's huge, and it's made of. I don't even know what it's made of. I don't know either, Chin admitted. But I have no choice. She ran toward the pantry, where she kept her ingredients. There were still pieces of dough and sugar left, some that had been forgotten in the rush to finish the other creatures. She pulled them down from the shelves, her hands moving with a sense of urgency as the beast rumbled in the background. Chin! Teo called, his voice strained. Hurry! The beast had reached the center of the bakery now, and its glowing eyes bore down on them. It was getting closer. The weight of the creature's presence was almost unbearable, and Chin could feel her heart racing in her chest as she scooped handfuls of sugar and dough. It was the only way. She had to finish the monster before it completely consumed everything. Chin molded the dough with frantic movements, quickly sculpting it into the shape of a more detailed head, adding finishing touches to the creature's body. It was strange, every movement felt like she was adding a part of herself into it. The magic in the dough responded to her touch, and for a brief moment, she could feel the tension easing from the room. But the creature wasn't finished yet. It still moved, its steps shaking the bakery with every thundering footfall. Chin didn't stop. She couldn't. With one final, desperate motion, she pushed the last piece of sugar dough into place, completing the beast's head. It let out a roar. The roar that erupted from the creature's mouth was so deafening, it seemed to shake the walls of the bakery. Chin stumbled back, nearly losing her footing as she stared at the beast she had created, now fully formed. The mixture of sugar, dough, and magic had come together into a towering figure, its glowing red eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. For a moment, the creature stood still, its massive body heaving with each breath. Chin could see the faint shimmer of magic in its body, a swirling, ethereal glow that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. It was alive, and it was waiting. Chin! Teo's voice broke through the tension. The bakery was eerily quiet for a moment as the beast stood before Chin, its massive form towering over her, its red eyes glowing with an unearthly light. The air was thick with tension, and the only sound that could be heard was the creature's heavy breathing. Chin could feel the weight of its gaze on her, and for a moment, she wondered if she had made the right choice. Was finishing the creature truly the solution? Or had she just made it more dangerous than it already was? Teo's voice broke through her thoughts, his panic evident. Chin, what are you going to do? It's not stopping. Chin swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. I don't know, Teo, but I have to try. The creature suddenly let out another deafening roar, shaking the entire bakery. Chin flinched, but she held her ground. This was it. This was the moment that would either save them all or destroy everything she had worked for. Without thinking, Chin reached for the closest tool, a rolling pin, gripping it tightly as if it could protect her from the creature's fury. She had no idea if it would work, but it was all she had. The beast moved toward her, its massive paws shaking the ground beneath her feet. It was as if it was challenging her, daring her to make the next move. Chin, please! Teo's voice was now frantic. We have to do something. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her thoughts. I can't fight it like this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I have to finish it, completely. If I don't, it will keep growing stronger. But how? Teo's question was filled with fear and confusion. Chin's mind raced as she looked at the beast. She knew that her creations weren't just objects, they were vessels for magic. The power to finish them was hers, but so was the power to destroy them. She stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. The beast's eyes followed her every move, and for a moment, Chin felt as if she were walking toward her own doom. But she couldn't stop. She had to stop the creature before it consumed everything in its path. The lion, the wolf, and the bear were still standing in the background, watching her, their eyes no longer glowing with menace. It was as if they were waiting for her to make the next move, to complete the final act that would either end the curse or doom them all. Chin approached the beast, her heart racing. The creature seemed to growl low in its throat, a warning, a challenge, but Chin pressed on. She raised the rolling pin high, her hand shaking as she spoke the words that would seal its fate. "By the magic that created you, I command you to rest. I finish what I have started. You will return to the world from which you came." The air in the bakery seemed to still, and the beast stopped in its tracks, its eyes locking with hers. For a moment, Chin thought she saw something else in its gaze, a flicker of recognition, of understanding. Then, with a sudden movement, the beast collapsed to the floor, its massive form crumbling into pieces. The dough and sugar that had once made up its body began to break apart, slowly dissolving into dust. Chin collapsed to her knees, her breath coming in short gasps. It was over. The beast was gone. Teo rushed to her side, his hand on her shoulder. "Chin, is it really over?" Chin looked up at him, her face pale, her body trembling from the exertion. She wasn't sure. She wasn't sure if the curse had truly been lifted or if the worst was yet to come. But for now, the bakery was silent. The creatures she had created, the lion, the wolf, the bear, were still, their glowing eyes no longer filled with hunger or rage. They were just still. The air in the room began to return to normal, the temperature dropping, the magic slowly fading. But Chin knew that she couldn't let her guard down. Not yet. The curse had been powerful, and its effects could last longer than she expected. "What now?" Teo asked, his voice soft but filled with uncertainty. "I don't know," Chin said, her eyes scanning the remains of the bakery. "But I'm not going to stop. I'll keep baking. I'll keep creating. But this time, I'll make sure it's finished. All of it." The silence in the bakery was overwhelming. The beast, now reduced to nothing but a pile of sugar and dough, lay scattered across the floor in a heap of lifelessness. The air felt heavy, like the weight of the world had been lifted, but Chin knew better than to let her guard down. The curse had been powerful, and she feared the repercussions of unfinished magic lingering in the air. Teo knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder, as if trying to offer her some comfort, but his eyes were filled with concern. "Chin, you did it, but are you sure it's really over? Is there more?" Chin glanced around the bakery, her mind racing. The lion, the wolf, and the bear, the creatures that had once been part of her magic, stood at a distance, as if uncertain of what had just transpired. Their eyes had lost their glow, but they still lingered in the shadows of the bakery. There was something in their gaze that made Chin uneasy. Were they waiting for something? Or perhaps, were they waiting for her? "I don't know," she muttered, standing up shakily. "I don't know if it's over, Teo. The curse was never fully in my control. It has always had a life of its own." Teo's brow furrowed. "But you finished it. The beast is gone. It should be over now." Chin shook her head. "I don't think it works that way. It's too powerful, too ancient. I might have stopped one thing, but there's always something else lingering. Magic like this doesn't just vanish." She slowly approached the corner where the creatures stood, their bodies still and their eyes eerily calm. The lion's gaze met hers, and for a brief moment, she saw something in its eyes, a quiet sadness. It was as if it understood the price of her actions. The wolf, normally fierce and wild, remained motionless, its gaze distant. The bear, a towering figure of strength, seemed to sense her approach and watched her carefully, as though waiting for her next move. "They're different now," Chin said quietly, her voice tinged with both relief and fear. "But I don't think they'll leave. They've been a part of this curse from the beginning. And if I'm right, they'll always be here, watching." Teo looked over at the creatures with a mixture of awe and fear. "Do you think they'll hurt you?" "No," Chin said, her voice steady. "Not anymore. But they're part of the magic now. They can't be free until I am. Until I'm free from the curse." There was a long silence as Chin considered her next words. The bakery felt different, as though it had been through something profound and unsettling. The magic that had once fueled her creations had changed, perhaps even turned on her. She knew there was no going back. "Chin," Teo said softly, his voice breaking through her thoughts. "What if you left? What if we left this place and started over somewhere else? You can make your cakes anywhere, right? This doesn't have to be the end of everything." Chin turned to him, meeting his gaze. She could see the hope in his eyes, the desire for a fresh start. But Chin had always known that leaving wasn't the answer. This bakery, this city, it was a part of her. She couldn't just walk away from it. No, she said firmly. Leaving won't fix what's happened here. It's a part of me, and I need to face it. I need to finish what I started, completely. The curse might have been lifted, but the magic it left behind still needs to be dealt with. I need to set things right, Teo. And I can't do that if I run away. Teo sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I understand. But what do we do now? Do you think you can stop the magic from growing again? Chin glanced at the creatures once more. The lion, the wolf, and the bear remained still, watching her with their calm, understanding eyes. They seemed to be waiting for her decision. She could feel the weight of their gaze pressing on her, as if they knew she held the key to breaking the final piece of the curse. I have to finish them, she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet determination. The creatures are part of the curse. If I don't complete their forms, the magic will never stop. Teo's eyes widened. You mean, make them whole? Chin nodded slowly. Yes. If I don't, they'll continue to be bound to the curse. They were never meant to be incomplete. But it's not just about the creatures. I have to finish the magic. It's the only way to make sure it doesn't come back. She turned back to the pantry, her movements deliberate as she gathered the ingredients she needed. The flour, the sugar, the eggs. They were the same ingredients that had once given birth to the creatures, her creations. Now, they would give her the power to finish them. As Chin began to work, mixing the ingredients together with focused precision, she could feel the magic stirring once more. It was in the air, a subtle hum, like the pulse of a heartbeat. But this time, it didn't feel like a curse. It felt like the beginning of something new. The creatures, her creations, moved closer, their forms now fully realized in her mind. The lion, the wolf, and the bear, each one waiting for its final piece, its final touch. Chin worked quickly, her hands moving with practiced skill, weaving magic into the dough, shaping it into the creature's forms. As she worked, she could feel the magic ebbing away from her, as if she were giving everything she had into this final act. Chin's hands moved swiftly, the ingredients combining with an energy she had never felt before. The magic hummed in the air, swirling around her as she shaped the creatures. The lion's form began to solidify before her eyes, its body taking shape as the dough rose, turning golden brown. The wolf's piercing eyes emerged from the dough, and the bear's massive paws began to take their final form, the strength of the creature rippling through the sugar and flour. As she worked, the creatures gathered around her, waiting patiently. Their eyes were now calm, no longer filled with hunger or rage, but an understanding that transcended their origins. Chin could feel it, the magic had changed. It wasn't a curse anymore. It was a gift. The bakery was filled with the sweet scent of baking, a warm, comforting aroma that made Chin pause for a moment. She took a deep breath, allowing the peace to wash over her. She had come so far, faced so much, and now the end was in sight. But she knew better than to think it was over just yet. She turned to the creatures, her heart racing. The lion, the wolf, and the bear stood still, their eyes watching her intently. There was a strange connection between them now, a bond that felt unbreakable. They weren't just the result of her baking. They had become something more, something alive. I finished, Chin whispered, her voice barely above a breath. You're whole now. The lion let out a low growl, but it wasn't menacing. It was as if it was acknowledging her, thanking her for completing it. The wolf let out a soft howl, the sound echoing through the bakery in a hauntingly beautiful way. And the bear, standing tall and imposing, lowered its head, its eyes softening in a way Chin had never expected. You're free, Chin said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. She had given everything to finish them, but now she felt as though the magic had finally been released. The creatures were no longer bound to her curse, they were now living beings in their own right. Teo stepped forward, his expression a mix of awe and disbelief. Chin, what did you do? Chin turned to him, her eyes filled with a quiet certainty. I gave them life. And I gave them freedom. Teo blinked in confusion, still trying to grasp what was happening. But they were your creations. Your curse. How could you? I made a choice, Chin interrupted gently. I could have destroyed them. I could have let the curse consume everything. But instead, I gave them a chance to live. To be something more than just magic. Teo was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. I see. But what now? What happens to them? Chin turned back to the creatures. Now they go where they belong, she said. I don't know where that is, but I know it's not here. They're free to live their own lives, without the curse. They're no longer mine to control. As she spoke, something shifted in the bakery. The creatures began to move, their massive forms becoming less rigid, more fluid. The lion stretched, its body rippling with power, and the wolf trotted to the door, pausing only to glance back at Chin. The bear lumbered toward the window, its eyes meeting hers one last time before it turned and disappeared into the night. Chin watched them go, a sense of peace settling over her. The bakery, the city, her life, they were all still here, but something had changed. The magic was gone, the curse lifted. She had faced the darkest part of herself, and now it was over. Teo came up beside her, his hand resting lightly on her arm. You did it, Chin. You saved them. Chin smiled faintly, the weight of the past lifting from her shoulders. I don't know if I saved them. But I gave them a chance. And that's all I could do. Teo nodded, his eyes reflecting a mixture of admiration and relief. So, what now? What do we do? Chin looked around the bakery, the familiar surroundings now feeling somehow different, as if they had been transformed. She had no clear answer, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't need one. The future was uncertain, but it was hers to shape. I think, Chin began, her voice steady and confident, we start fresh. We rebuild. We keep baking. Teo raised an eyebrow. That's it. Chin laughed softly, a sound filled with both joy and a little sadness. That's it. The magic is gone. But the baking, that's always been the most important part. It's my gift to the world. Teo smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Well then, let's get to work. As the night deepened, Chin and Teo stood together in the bakery, surrounded by the remnants of the creatures she had created. The magic was gone, but the love, the passion, the art of baking, those would remain. And for the first time in a long while, Chin felt at peace with herself and the world around her. The creatures had left, but their legacy lived on in her. And in that moment, she knew that whatever came next, she would face it with strength and hope. The journey was far from over. Chin's hand shook slightly as she wiped the last of the flour from her countertop. The bakery, once a place of dread and chaos, had been restored to its familiar warmth and calm. The scent of freshly baked bread and cakes filled the air, a comforting presence that seemed to soothe her nerves. Yet, despite the relief she felt, there was still a gnawing thought in her mind. The creatures were gone. The curse had been lifted. But there was something about the magic that lingered, a shadow that hadn't completely disappeared. She could feel it in the way the air still seemed to hum with energy, as though the world was waiting for something. Teo had left her to finish cleaning, but Chin knew he would be back soon. He had been patient with her, supportive even when she hadn't understood what was happening. Now, she had to face the reality of what came next. She stood by the window, gazing out at the quiet city streets of Lagos. The bustling life of the city had returned to normal. People walked by in their usual hurry, lost in their own worlds, unaware of the strange magic that had once gripped the bakery. But Chin knew that nothing would ever be the same again. She had let go of the curse, but it had left a mark on her. A mark that would remain, no matter how hard she tried to forget. As she stared out into the distance, her mind wandered to the future. What was she supposed to do now? The creatures were gone, their magic fading into the night, but her gift, her ability to create life with her baking, was still very much alive. It was this gift, after all, that had caused all the chaos. And yet, it was this same gift that had brought her peace. She had learned to control the magic, to use it responsibly, to give it life when it needed to be set free. But could she continue to do so? Could she keep baking, knowing the power she held in her hands? Chin closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She had spent so long fearing the magic, trying to suppress it, but she realized now that she couldn't run from it. It was a part of her. It always had been. Maybe that's what I need to accept, she whispered to herself. I don't need to hide from it. I just need to be careful. I need to respect it. The sound of the door creaking open interrupted her thoughts. Teo stood in the doorway, his arms crossed over his chest, a gentle smile playing on his lips. Hey, you good? Chin turned toward him, her gaze softening. Yeah, she said, her voice steady. I'm good. It's just... I don't know what comes next. Teo walked over to her, resting a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to have all the answers right now. We'll figure it out, together. Chin smiled faintly, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. But how do we move forward? The magic, the curse, it's all over. But it doesn't feel like it's really gone. It feels like it's still here, lingering. Teo's expression turned serious, and he leaned in closer. Chin, the magic was never just about the curse. It was always about you. It's your gift, your talent. The magic was never bad. It only became a problem when it was used in fear, when it was left uncontrolled. But now, you know how to control it. Chin looked down at her hands, fingers stained with flour. She had spent so much of her life doubting her own abilities, always wondering whether the magic would consume her. But now, for the first time, she felt ready to accept it, to embrace it. I want to keep baking, she said slowly, the words feeling like a declaration. I want to use my gift. But I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want to create monsters. Teo smiled warmly. You won't. You've learned the lessons. You know how to keep it in check. Chin nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure. The magic had a life of its own, and she wasn't sure if she could control every part of it. But she was willing to try. I've been thinking, Teo continued, his tone playful. You've got a gift, Chin. You're not just a baker, you're an artist. What if you used that gift for something more? What if you created something beautiful, something that could change people's lives? Chin raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I mean, what if you used your magic to create things that don't just bring food to people, but joy, hope? What if you made something magical in the real sense of the word? Cakes and pastries that could inspire, heal, and bring people together. Chin thought about it for a moment. Could she do that? Could she bake with purpose, with the intention of sharing beauty and joy, rather than fear and control? I think I can, she said softly, a spark of determination lighting up in her eyes. I think that's what I'm meant to do. I can still bake, still create. But this time, I'll do it with love, not magic. Teo grinned, clearly pleased with her decision. That's the spirit. Chin turned back to the countertop, her mind now filled with possibilities. She had been given a second chance, a new beginning. She could use her gift, but this time, it would be different. No more monsters. No more curses. Just the beauty of creation, shared with the world. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Chin felt ready to face it head-on. The sun rose slowly over Lagos, casting its golden light across the bustling streets. The city, as always, was alive, filled with the sounds of honking cars, chattering pedestrians, and the distant hum of the ever-busy market. But today, for Chin, it felt different. Today, she wasn't just a baker, she was someone with purpose. Someone ready to share her gift with the world in a way that would inspire and uplift. The bakery was quiet early in the morning, save for the soft hum of the oven. Chin moved through her kitchen with a renewed sense of clarity, her hand steady as she began to prepare for the day. The shelves, once filled with the remnants of her cursed creations, were now neatly stocked with the ingredients for something new. Something beautiful. She was ready to make a change. Teo had been a constant source of support, encouraging her every step of the way. After their conversation the night before, she had spent hours planning, her mind buzzing with ideas. This wasn't just about baking anymore, it was about sharing the magic of creation in a way that would touch people's hearts, not their fears. As she rolled out the dough, her thoughts wandered to the people of Lagos. They were always in a rush, always chasing after something, never stopping to appreciate the simple joys of life. But Chin knew that the right creation, the right gift, could bring them together. It could remind them of the beauty in the small things, the joy that came from taking a moment to savor something sweet. She thought of her customers, the families, the couples, the workers who came to her bakery every day. She thought of how their faces lit up when they took the first bite of her cakes, how they would sigh in satisfaction at the richness of the flavors. This was what she had to offer, a moment of peace, a small escape from the chaos of their lives. But this time, it would be different. She wasn't just going to bake her usual cakes. She was going to create something that would truly leave a mark. Something that would change the way people saw food, and perhaps, even the way they saw each other. The idea had come to her in a flash, and now, as she worked, she felt the excitement building. She had always been careful with the magic in her baking, but now, she felt a sense of control, a connection to her craft that was deeper than before. The sun was fully up now, and the city outside continued to hum with energy. Chin placed the final touches on her creation, her fingers moving with practiced ease. A cake shaped like a tree, its branches spreading out like the arms of a loving parent. Each branch held a different fruit, representing the diversity of life in Lagos. The cake was a symbol of connection, of community, and of growth. It was her gift to the city. She stepped back, admiring her work. The cake wasn't just beautiful, it was alive, in its own way. The sugar petals shimmered with a soft glow, the fruit glistening with a fresh, dewy shine. There was magic in it, but this time, it wasn't the kind that caused chaos. It was the kind that brought people together. Chin took a deep breath, her heart racing. It was time to share her creation with the world. As she walked out of the bakery, carrying the cake with her, the city seemed to pause for a moment. The busy streets, the noisy vendors, the honking cars, all of it faded into the background. For the first time in a long while, Chin felt truly connected to the world around her. The magic of the cake was no longer something to fear. It was something to share. Teo stood outside, waiting for her. He grinned when he saw the cake. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "What is it?" "It's for the city," Chin said softly. "A gift. To remind them that there's magic in the world, but it's not the kind that can hurt. It's the kind that connects us." Teo smiled, his eyes shining with pride. "I think the city will love it." Together, they walked toward the market, where the heart of Lagos beat with an energy all its own. As they moved through the crowded streets, people began to notice the cake. The colors, the shape, the shimmer, it was unlike anything they had ever seen. Curious faces turned to look, and soon, a small crowd had gathered around Chin and Teo. Chin set the cake down on a table near a busy stall. She stepped back, watching as people began to gather around it, their eyes wide with wonder. It was like the city had stopped in its tracks, drawn to the beauty of the cake and the message it carried. One by one, people began to take a slice, and as they did, something strange happened. There was a sense of unity, a connection that went beyond the simple act of sharing food. People smiled at each other, strangers became friends, and for a moment, the hectic pace of the city slowed down. It was as if the cake had brought them together, reminded them of something they had forgotten, the importance of slowing down, of savoring life's simple pleasures. Chin watched all of this in silence, her heart swelling with pride. She had given them something more than just a cake. She had given them a moment of peace, of shared joy. And that, she realized, was the true magic of her gift. As the last slice was taken and the crowd began to disperse, Chin and Teo stood together, watching the people return to their lives. But something had changed. There was a new sense of togetherness in the air, a new energy that hadn't been there before. Chin turned to Teo, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "For believing in me. For believing in this." Teo smiled, his hand resting on her shoulder. "You did all the work, Chin. You created this magic. And now, the world gets to see it." Chin looked out at the city, her heart full. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, she felt ready to embrace it. She was no longer afraid of her gift. She was proud of it. And she was ready to share it with the world, one creation at a time. The city of Lagos had been buzzing ever since Chin's magical cake had made its grand debut. Word spread quickly, as it often did in a place like this, where news moved faster than the traffic jams on a rainy day. The bakery was busier than ever, lines stretching out the door as people waited to taste the magic that had brought the city together. And for Chin, life seemed to be changing in ways she had never imagined. But as the days went by, something strange began to happen. People weren't just asking for the cake, they were asking for more. More creations, more magic. They wanted her to bring that same sense of unity to every dish, every pastry she baked. It felt as though the whole city had latched onto her gift, and now, the pressure was mounting. Chin had always loved baking, but she had never considered it would become a calling. She never imagined her simple act of creating sweet treats would take on such a grand purpose. Yet, as the requests piled in, she couldn't deny the excitement that filled her each time she placed an order into the oven, watching the magic unfold before her eyes. However, amidst all the success and praise, a nagging question lingered at the back of her mind: was this magic really hers to control? She had felt in control when she had created the tree cake, when she had shared it with the city, but as the demands grew, so did the uncertainty. What if she couldn't keep up with the magic? What if it spiraled out of her control again, like it had before? Could she handle the consequences? It was one morning, as Chin sat in the back of the bakery, staring at the mess of flour and sugar strewn across the counter, that she realized something. She had never truly understood the magic that fueled her baking. The oven hummed in the corner, its heat warming the room, but it was the distant, lingering sensation in the air that caught her attention. The magic had always been there, but now it felt different. It felt restless. Is something wrong? Teo's voice broke through her thoughts. He had come into the back to check on her, as he often did, bringing with him the fresh energy she had come to rely on. Chin didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gazed at the small jar of vanilla extract that sat on the counter. It was the simplest of ingredients, but it always added something special to her cakes. Something warm. Something comforting. But was it just the vanilla? No, Chin realized. There was more to it than that. Something else had been in every creation she made, something she hadn't fully acknowledged until now. The true secret ingredient. Teo noticed her focus shift to the jar and followed her gaze. "What is it?" he asked, stepping closer. Chin reached out, her fingers brushing the jar. "I've been thinking," she said slowly. "About the magic. About why it works, why it feels so alive. It's not just the ingredients. It's not just the technique." Teo raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I think it's because of the love I put into the baking," she said, her voice soft but confident. "It's more than just a recipe or a secret formula. The magic, it comes from the heart. It comes from caring, from truly wanting to give something of yourself to others. That's why the tree cake worked. It wasn't just about the design or the flavors. It was about the intention behind it." Teo nodded, understanding dawning on him. "So the real secret ingredient isn't something you can bottle up or measure. It's you, Chin. It's your heart." Chin smiled softly. "Yes. I've always known that my baking was special, but I never understood why. Now I know. It's not the ingredients, it's the love, the care, the connection I have with what I'm making." She stood up, a sense of clarity washing over her. "I've been afraid of the magic because I didn't understand it. But now I see that it's not something to fear. It's just a part of who I am. And as long as I bake with love, with pure intentions, I can control it." Teo grinned. "Sounds like you figured it out. So what now?" Chin took a deep breath and looked around the bakery. The shelves were filled with the tools of her craft, and the kitchen was filled with the comforting sounds of preparation. She had learned to embrace her gift, to use it to connect with others, to create something beautiful. But there was still more to do. The city needed her creations, and she was ready to give them. "I'm going to continue," Chin said with conviction. "But I'll do it on my terms. I'll bake with intention, with heart. And I'll use my gift to create, not just food, but memories. Moments of joy. Moments of connection. Teo smiled proudly. That's the Chin I know. Chin stepped over to the counter and began to work, mixing flour and sugar with a sense of purpose. She knew that her creations wouldn't just be cakes and pastries, they would be gifts, moments of magic that would remind people of the beauty in the world. As she worked, the magic in the room seemed to respond. It wasn't a dangerous force anymore, something to be controlled. It was a gentle companion, guiding her hands, encouraging her to create, to share, to give. The air hummed with energy, but it wasn't unsettling, it was comforting, familiar. I think the city will need more than just cake, Chin mused aloud. I think it needs something that will really bring people together. Teo looked at her curiously. What do you mean? Chin smiled, her mind already racing with ideas. I'm going to bake a feast. Not just for the rich or the poor, but for everyone. Something that will unite us all. A festival of food. A celebration of what it means to share, to connect, to be human. Teo's eyes lit up. That sounds amazing, Chin. Let's do it. And so, as the city of Lagos continued to bustle outside, Chin and Teo began to prepare for the next big step. The bakery, once just a small shop on a quiet street, would soon become the center of something greater. The magic would continue, but this time, it would not just be about the baking. It would be about the people. It was time for the city to experience something even more magical than before. Lagos was no stranger to celebration. The city was filled with festivals, markets, and street parties at every corner. But Chin's vision for a festival was different. She wanted to create something that would bring people together in a way they hadn't experienced before. Not just a celebration of food, but a celebration of unity, of shared moments, of community. Chin's idea had sparked excitement not just in her heart, but in the hearts of the people who heard about it. Word spread fast, faster than any festival announcement ever had. The excitement was palpable as the day drew closer. The festival wasn't just for the wealthy elite or the ordinary people, it was for everyone. It was for Lagos, for the city that had helped shape her and her gift. In the days leading up to the festival, Chin worked tirelessly in her bakery, creating new dishes and pastries that incorporated the love and magic that had defined her work from the start. She made pies, cookies, breads, cakes, each one designed with intention, filled with flavors and textures that told stories of the city, of its people, of its past and future. Teo, as always, was there by her side, helping with the logistics, spreading the word, and encouraging everyone to join. The festival would take place in the heart of Lagos, at the bustling market square, where food vendors, artisans, and performers gathered regularly. But this time, it would be different. This time, the square would be transformed into a place of magic, where food wasn't just consumed, but experienced. The night before the festival, Chin stood at the window of her bakery, looking out at the city that had given her everything. The streetlights glowed softly, and the hum of the city seemed quieter than usual, as if the city itself was holding its breath in anticipation. Teo stood beside her, his gaze following hers. "Tomorrow's the big day," he said, his voice filled with pride. "Do you think the people will love it?" Chin turned to him, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "They've already loved it. The food, the magic, it's not just about the cakes anymore. It's about the connection we're building." Teo nodded, understanding her completely. "And you're ready for it?" Chin took a deep breath and looked out the window again. "Yes. I'm ready. I've been ready for a long time. This is the beginning of something new, not just for me, but for all of us." The next morning, the sun rose early, casting a golden light across Lagos. The festival day had arrived, and the energy in the air was electric. Chin and Teo loaded the last of the pastries into baskets, checking everything twice. They made their way to the market square, where vendors were already setting up their stalls. The square, which was usually a jumble of colors, smells, and noises, was now transformed. Garlands of flowers hung from every corner, tables covered with cloths that shimmered like the sunset. Music filled the air, a soft rhythm that invited everyone to dance, to celebrate. As Chin set up her table, she noticed how different it all felt. The cake, the pies, the breads, they were more than just food today. They were the symbol of something greater. They represented a new beginning, a shared moment of joy and togetherness. She arranged each dish carefully, making sure everything was perfect. Each slice of cake was a piece of her heart, each cookie a part of her soul. The people began to gather, drawn by the sweet smells wafting through the air. They came from all corners of Lagos, from the quiet neighborhoods to the bustling streets, from the rich to the poor. The festival was open to all. As the first person stepped forward to take a slice of cake, something shifted in the air. It was subtle, but Chin could feel it, a ripple of magic, of connection. People began to eat, their faces lighting up with surprise and joy. As they took the first bite, it wasn't just the sweetness of the food they tasted, it was the love that Chin had poured into it. The magic wasn't just in the cakes, it was in the way people connected with one another. The conversations that began over pastries grew into laughter, into stories, into shared experiences. Teo stood beside Chin, watching as people gathered around the table, sharing, connecting. He turned to her, his eyes filled with admiration. "You've done it. You've created something beautiful." Chin smiled softly, her heart swelling with pride. "No, Teo. We did it. This isn't just my magic, it's the magic of everyone coming together." As the day went on, the festival grew, and the square filled with even more people. Vendors offered dishes from all over Lagos, musicians played tunes that filled the air with joy, and dancers twirled in the streets, their bodies moving to the rhythm of the city. The energy was infectious. The magic of Chin's creations had sparked something that could not be contained. It was no longer just about food, it was about community, about the shared experience of being together. Chin walked through the festival, her heart full as she watched the city come alive in a way it never had before. People who had once been strangers were now laughing together, exchanging stories over food, over sweets. The divisions that had once seemed so wide between the rich and the poor, the young and the old, had begun to fade, replaced by something deeper, something that bound them all together. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Chin found herself standing at the edge of the square, watching the scene unfold before her. She had created something beautiful, something that had brought people together in a way she had never thought possible. But as the night grew darker, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The magic in the air was still there, but now it felt different. It wasn't just the magic of the cakes or the food, it was something deeper, something that Chin had only just begun to understand. There was a deeper force at play, something beyond her control. As she turned to Teo, ready to share her thoughts, she was interrupted by a sudden chill in the air. The music faltered for a moment, and a hush fell over the crowd. The magic seemed to be shifting again, but this time, it felt unsettling. Teo looked at her, his expression tense. "What's happening, Chin?" Chin swallowed hard, her heart racing. "I don't know. But I think the magic is changing." The air crackled with energy, and Chin felt a surge of fear rise within her. The magic had always been a part of her, but now it felt as though it had a life of its own. And as the people of Lagos continued to celebrate around her, she realized that the magic she had awakened might be more powerful and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. As Chin stood in the middle of the festival, the atmosphere around her changed. The once joyous air now felt heavy, thick with an energy that she couldn't quite understand. It wasn't the kind of magic she had known, the kind that brought people together through her cakes. This was different. Darker. And it was growing stronger with every passing second. Teo, noticing the shift in her expression, took a step closer. "Chin, what's happening?" His voice was filled with concern, the uncertainty clear in his tone. Chin clenched her fists, the tingling sensation in her fingertips telling her something was wrong. Her cakes, her creations, they had always been filled with love, warmth, and the magic she had learned to control. But this? This was something else, something beyond her understanding. The more people ate the food, the stronger the energy became. It felt like the magic had a mind of its own, twisting and turning, spreading through the city like a wildfire. As she stood there, paralyzed by the weight of it all, a distant growl echoed through the streets. The sound was low at first, barely audible, but it grew louder, closer. The crowd seemed to sense it too. People began to turn, looking around nervously. Whispers filled the air, but no one knew what was happening. The festival, once a celebration of unity, now felt like a trap. Suddenly, from the crowd, a massive figure emerged. It was a lion, its golden mane glowing under the streetlights. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity, and its muscles rippled beneath its fur as it prowled forward. The air around it crackled with dark energy, like a storm waiting to break. Chin's heart pounded in her chest. The lion's presence wasn't just intimidating, it was terrifying. She knew this creature wasn't real. It was a product of her magic, of the food she had baked, but it had taken on a life of its own. It was no longer under her control. People screamed and began to run in every direction, but the lion moved with the grace and speed of a predator. It bared its teeth, its growl vibrating through the ground. Chin's breath hitched in her throat. She had to do something, but what? How could she stop something she had unwittingly brought to life? Chin, you have to stop it! Teo shouted over the chaos, his eyes wide with fear. Chin took a step forward, but before she could move any closer, the lion turned its gaze toward her. The intensity of its stare froze her in place. It was as though it knew who she was, as though it was waiting for her to make the next move. Then, with a roar that shook the ground beneath her, the lion lunged. Chin didn't have time to think. She stumbled backward, her heart racing as the creature barreled toward her, its claws flashing in the dim light. The crowd had scattered, but the lion was relentless, its eyes never leaving her. Teo reached out and grabbed her arm, pulling her to safety just as the lion swiped at the air where she had stood moments before. Chin's breath caught in her throat as they fell to the ground. The lion circled them, its eyes gleaming with malice. It was like nothing she had ever seen before, too real, too dangerous. "We need to stop this," Chin gasped, struggling to stand. She knew that if she didn't find a way to regain control, things would spiral out of hand. "I have to stop the magic, Teo. But I don't know how." The magic, the curse, it had started with her temper, with her desire to create something so powerful that it would leave a lasting legacy. But now, it had turned on her. The lion wasn't just a random creature, it was a reflection of her own anger, her frustrations, her unresolved emotions. The magic she had harnessed had become something she couldn't contain. Teo looked at her, his face filled with worry. "What can we do? We can't just fight it with force." Chin nodded, realizing that Teo was right. The lion wasn't something that could be beaten with strength. It was a manifestation of something deeper. And she needed to face that something head-on. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to center herself. She remembered the love and care she had always put into her baking. She remembered the joy of seeing people come together, of sharing her food with them. That was the magic she knew, the magic that had always brought people closer. But now, the magic was twisted. It was tainted by her anger, by the pride she had once taken in her work, and by the way she had let her emotions dictate her creations. The lion, the destruction, it was a reflection of everything she had failed to reconcile within herself. Taking a deep breath, Chin stepped forward again, slowly this time. She spoke aloud, her voice calm but firm. "I created you. But I can undo this. I can stop the magic from controlling me." The lion growled, its lips curling back, but Chin didn't flinch. She closed her eyes again, reaching deep within herself. She needed to find a balance. She needed to reclaim her power, not through anger or fear, but through understanding. She needed to remember that her magic was meant to create, not destroy. As Chin focused on the energy inside her, she felt the tension in the air begin to shift. Slowly, the lion's growl softened. Its glowing eyes dimmed. The chaos around them seemed to quiet, and the lion paused, as if waiting for her to make the next move. Chin opened her eyes, locking gazes with the creature. "I don't control you through fear anymore. I control you with love. I control you with peace." For a moment, the lion stood still, as if contemplating her words. Then, with a final low growl, it slowly began to shrink, its massive form shrinking back into the air from which it had come. The glow faded, and the magical creature dissolved into nothingness. The square was silent for a long moment, the only sound the distant hum of the city. Chin stood frozen, her body trembling from the adrenaline. She had done it. She had stopped the magic. But at what cost? Teo approached her slowly, his expression unreadable. Chin. What just happened? Chin shook her head, her mind still racing. I created something I couldn't control. The magic, it's stronger than I thought. Teo's voice was soft, but firm. Then what happens now? Chin looked out at the empty square, the echoes of the festival still lingering in the air. Now, I have to find a way to master it, for all of us. The journey had only just begun. The next morning, the city was quiet. Too quiet. The usual bustle of Lagos, horns honking, hawkers shouting, the distant beat of Afrobeat music, seemed muffled, like the city itself was holding its breath. Word of the magical lion had spread, not just through whispers on street corners, but across social media, radio stations, and news platforms. Everyone had an opinion, but no one had answers. Chin sat in her bakery, her apron still dusted with flour, staring blankly at the oven. It was off. Silent. She hadn't baked a thing since the festival. She was afraid to. Afraid of what might come out next. The chairs were empty, the glass display case filled with untouched pastries from the day before. She had sent her staff home. This wasn't something anyone could help her with. Not even Teo. The bell above the door jingled lightly. Chin turned sharply, her muscles tensing. It was Mama Ireti, the old woman who sold herbs by the corner of Olenade Street. She wore the same faded wrapper and walked with her usual slow, steady grace. But there was something different in her eyes, something deeper, more knowing. You have stirred the pot too long, child, Mama Ireti said, not as a greeting, but as a statement. Chin swallowed, not sure how to respond. Did you see what happened? I saw everything. I felt everything, the woman replied as she took a seat without asking. You have awakened what was never meant to rise. Chin frowned. What do you mean? I only baked cakes. I didn't mean to bring anything evil into this world. Mama Ireti sighed, resting her old hands on the table. Magic has no loyalty. It only amplifies the heart that wields it. Yours was once soft, full of joy. But anger, pride, fear, they crept in. Chin felt tears sting her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I never asked for this power. I just wanted people to love my cakes. And they did, Mama Ireti nodded. But love turned into praise. Praise turned into ego. Ego twisted your magic. There was a silence between them. Heavy. Real. Why me? Chin whispered. Why was I given this kind of gift? You weren't given it, Mama Ireti said gently. You inherited it. Chin looked up sharply. What? You never asked about your grandmother, did you? Chin shook her head slowly. Her mother barely spoke of the past. She was the most feared baker in all of Abeokuta. Feared not because she made bad food, but because her food did things people couldn't explain. People came to her with problems, infertility, heartbreak, curses. She baked for them. And things changed. A chill ran down Chin's spine. She swore off baking after one incident that turned a family against itself. But magic doesn't die. It passes on. Chin blinked, her mind racing. Could it be true? So what do I do now? She asked, her voice trembling. How do I control it? Mama Ireti stood. You must go back. Not to the oven, but to the root. Chin frowned. What root? The house your grandmother died in. It still stands. In Abeokuta. Hidden, forgotten. But the truth waits there. The truth about what this power is and how to survive it. Chin's mouth felt dry. Will I find answers? Mama Ireti reached into the folds of her wrapper and dropped a small object on the table, a copper spoon, old and tarnished, yet strangely warm. You'll find more than answers. But be warned, the past doesn't like to be disturbed. The old woman turned and walked out, leaving Chin alone with the spoon and 1,000 new questions. Outside, the clouds darkened. And in the quiet corners of her bakery, where shadows clung to walls and whispers hummed beneath silence, something unseen stirred. The magic wasn't done with her yet. 2 days later, Chin stood on the cracked, overgrown path that led to the house her mother had never spoken of. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the dry earth. The gate creaked as she pushed it open, revealing an old compound swallowed by weeds and silence. The house loomed ahead, weather-worn, sun-bleached, and leaning ever so slightly to the left. Its mud walls were faded but still sturdy, and the wooden door bore strange carvings, swirls, symbols, and shapes Chin had never seen before. The copper spoon Mama Ireti gave her now hung from her neck on a red thread. It pulsed faintly with warmth, almost like a heartbeat. She hadn't told anyone she was coming. Not even Teo. The further she stepped into the compound, the louder her thoughts became. This was where it all started. Her grandmother's power. Her own strange gift. And maybe, just maybe, the key to breaking the curse that was now bound to her soul. She hesitated at the door, then raised her hand and knocked softly. Nothing. She tried again. Still nothing. Finally, with trembling fingers, she pushed the door open. Dust flew into the air like startled birds. The inside of the house was thick with silence, as though it had been waiting for her. Old furniture sat draped in white sheets. A sewing machine. A rusted iron pot. Shelves filled with jars, their contents long dried out. At the center of the room was a table, battered but firm, and on it sat a single, untouched cake tin. Chin moved slowly toward it. As she lifted the lid, a thick scent filled the air, spices, sugar, and something else, something bitter. Beneath the lid was an old, handwritten recipe book. Its pages were browned with age, its ink faded. She turned the first page. Her eyes widened. The handwriting matched hers. But she had never seen this book before in her life. Chinelo, a voice whispered. She froze. Her name echoed around the empty house. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice shaky. No reply. But the room had changed. Subtly. The air was denser. The shadows darker. She looked at the book again, and new words appeared where none had been before. To bake is to summon. To summon is to awaken. And to awaken is to carry the cost. Her fingers trembled as she turned the next page. There was a drawing, a lion with flaming eyes. The same creature that had appeared at the festival. Next to it, a note written in red ink. Born from rage. Fed by pride. Only the maker can decide. The spoon around her neck grew warmer. It throbbed like a drum. Chin stepped back, but the floor beneath her feet cracked slightly. She looked down, there was something under the boards. She dropped to her knees and pulled at the loose plank. Dust exploded into her face, making her cough. Underneath was a box. Old. Locked. And humming. She hesitated, then held up the spoon. As it neared the lock, the metal began to glow. The lock clicked open on its own. Inside the box was a bundle of letters, tied with red ribbon, and a smaller book with the word warnings carved into its leather cover. As she reached inside, something cold brushed against her wrist. She jerked her hand back, but nothing was there. Except now, the door behind her had closed. She was no longer alone in the house. A soft hum filled the room. Not mechanical. Not human. But musical. And behind her, a voice that sounded like wind through dry leaves whispered. "The oven is awake." Chin spun around, heart pounding. The door was still shut tight, yet she felt a presence in the room, a chill that settled on her skin like cold flour. She stared at the empty air behind her, eyes scanning for movement, for shadows, for anything. But there was nothing. Just the house, the hum, and the soft pulsing of the copper spoon on her chest. She turned back to the box and reached carefully for the smaller leather-bound book labeled Warnings. Its cover was dry and cracked like forgotten skin. As she opened the first page, a gust of air blew from its spine, as though the book had exhaled after years of being sealed. The first page was blank. The second, more so. But on the third, words began to scrawl themselves across the paper in dark, red-brown ink. Chin's breath caught in her throat as she watched it form, letter by letter, as if the book was alive. To bake with feeling is to bind soul to sugar. To create with fury is to invite beasts. Do not bake in anger. Do not bake with pride. For the batter will bear your burden, and the icing will whisper your intent. Chin blinked. These were not just poetic warnings, they were instructions. Rules. Boundaries. Rules she had broken. No wonder the lion had emerged from her hands that day. No wonder the sponge cake at the wedding slashed like claws through the crowd. She flipped through more pages. Each one detailed different emotions and the creatures they could summon. Envy created serpents with velvet tongues. Grief birthed shadows that fed on joy. Lust brought forth dancers with no eyes who whispered your deepest desires. She felt sick. This wasn't baking. This was conjuring. Her grandmother hadn't just been a baker. She had been a spiritual conduit, a woman who could stir up more than sweetness in a mixing bowl. Chin's hands trembled as she turned another page. This one held a simple recipe. At first glance, it looked ordinary: flour, eggs, sugar, butter. But beneath each item, there were strange additions. A drop of fresh regret. 3 seconds of eye contact with your reflection. 1 heartbeat held too long. Her stomach turned. These ingredients were symbolic. Emotional. But real. Who wrote this? She whispered aloud. Suddenly, a whisper crawled along the walls of the house, wrapping around her like a ribbon of smoke. You did. Chin spun around again. The humming had grown louder. The windows trembled. The walls seemed to breathe. No, she muttered. This isn't real. But as she looked back down at the book, her own handwriting appeared beneath the recipe, neat, cursive, undeniably hers. Made this on the day I buried my first heartbreak. She had never written those words. Not in this house. Not in that book. Yet somehow she had. Her hand hovered over the pages, and as it did, ink began forming once more. You've opened the door. You must finish the recipe, or be devoured by it. The spoon on her neck flared hot, then cold. She backed away from the table as a low creak echoed from the hallway behind her. The oven in the kitchen, long unplugged, glowed with a red light. The smell of baking filled the house, sweet and sharp, like burnt cinnamon and vanilla gone sour. She turned toward the hallway, knowing she shouldn't go. But knowing she must. The book of warnings in one hand, the spoon clutched in the other, Chin walked down the narrow hallway toward the glowing kitchen. And from behind the oven door, something breathed.